let's get to the reason we're all here tonight. Martina Lauchengco, I'm super excited to host her. She is a partner at Silicon Valley Product Group. You know, we've had Marty on here 6 times before. He's a big fan, a big friend of our group and a personal friend of mine. So I'm really excited that there's another book from SVPG that's out there, Love. So I've been kind of getting the secret inside scoop from Marty. I'm like, when is your other partner going to have a book? So I'm really excited. It just came out recently. She's also a partner at Costanoa Ventures. And before that, she worked at Cloud, Netscape, and Microsoft. And I'm really excited to learn what she's got to tell us about product marketing today and what product marketing really is and how to do it better. Okay, so thanks for a great talk. I thought we could have a little fireside
I love it.
Chat
Do
now.
or do not. There is no try.
I saw
that's what I should have at the end.
I saw
I love that.
You on that one slide. And then we gotta recap the breakdown of the Millennium Falcon cockpit. Who has which role here? Han is the salesperson.
Han Solo is the sales guy, the Maverick.
Okay.
Obi-Wan is the product and engineering sage.
Of course.
Chewie is the operations guy, customer success, all that.
Like he's got the headset on. He's got his headset.
Right. Yeah, he's all over it. And then Luke is the eager go-to-market, the marketer, the product marketer, who's trying to bring all these things together and is trying to learn the discipline at the same time. And then ultimately is able to utilize everything that he's taking from everyone else on everyone else's behalf.
There you go. Excellent. Team effort. I love it. Excellent. Cool. Okay. And somebody said Leia's the CEO.
And Leia's the CEO. Yes. 100%.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for a great talk. And you touched on this briefly, but maybe we can go a little more in depth. Like, what led you to write a book? There are a lot of people, practitioners out there that are practicing, but only a small percentage actually go through the effort, which is a lot, as we both know, to write a book. So I'm curious, what made you want to write a book?
Well, I've been thinking about it for a very long time. I've been teaching and working with people on product marketing for forever, but very explicitly in the last decade. And I would always get asked, do you have any book to recommend? And I never could recommend a book because I never thought that there was one that was capturing product marketing the way I thought it needed to be elevated.
Sure.
There were a lot of, and so I could recommend some good marketing books, some things that cover tactics, like I love Made to Stick. And I was like, there's no book that actually talks about this. Mm-hmm. So that was thing one. But thing two was I also realized there's just a real misunderstanding of the role, particularly with product teams. And I'd see this disconnect all the time where the marketers had a fuzzy idea and the product teams had no idea. And they'd be like, I don't know what it's supposed to be, but I don't think it's this. And the conflation between marketing and product marketing, I mean, you really have to be a student of this to know the difference. And so I wanted to write a book that took all of that on. What's the distinction between product marketing and the rest of marketing? What's the product marketer's role within of that? And how does it evolve over time? Because product marketing as a role shifts as organizations mature. So unlike a lot of roles that kind of stay the same and just scale, you're doing really different things. You're the total generalist in an early stage. You're doing everything. And as a company matures, you fine slice things, you get more specialized, and you do more and more very specifically focused things around the market. We're now going after this vertical, so now we have a specialist on that vertical. Or we span multiple products because we're trying to basically use our products as a portfolio. This happens for venture companies that have a dozen or more products. They don't have someone that's dedicated to one product. They have someone that's dedicated to a market. We're going after large enterprises. How do you take the bits and parts of our 12 products and make sure it's going to be capably sold to these larger enterprises? So that's why I wrote the book.
Okay, awesome, cool. Yeah, and you mentioned, it's interesting because in general, product marketing is successful companies have people with that title and they've got a decent org structure, but not all companies are at that point. Product management was kind of like that. It's still like that in some companies, but I think it's gotten a bit better. So this isn't on the questions we talked about, but it's like, what's your idea? What have you seen ideal? And maybe it varies by stage or size of company, but what's the ideal structure? There were some questions about where should product marketing report? And you mentioned that there's some confusion about the other parts of marketing. So I'm curious, not that there's one size fits all, but what are some ideal principles of how you structure your product marketing within the org, I guess?
Yeah, so this is actually something that's quite stage dependent. And I'd say the vast majority of organizations have product marketing as a marketing function, and that reports up into marketing. But one of the most important things is who is the leader that is capable of leading the function. So I saw this in a quite mature company where product marketing reported into a CMO who was really just brand marketing and operated in a silo and was not good at communicating with other organizations. And so they pulled it out of marketing and plucked it underneath the chief product officer because he really knew how to use it as a tool. So that's an instance of where put the organization with the leader who will let it function the way it needs to be successful. So that's an important part of the calculus as the stage of the company. But then within the stages, it will tend to be more product centric at the beginning because you're trying to help the world understand the product. And so it might live in marketing, but it's super close to product. And then later, where you are more market oriented, people understand what the product does. And so now you need to make it make sense for a particular market. So in the word example, we had someone focus purely on lawyers because it was the single biggest vertical. And then you orient much more towards markets as opposed to just products. So that's some basics on how to orient and
well, that's good.
Organize.
That's good. Well, it's good to know it's not a one size fits all. It makes a lot of sense. The leader that can best let the role do what they need to do. Cool. Well, let's go back to your book real quick. I got it right here. Thank you very much for this copy. It's great. How was the process of writing the book? Because every author has a different process. How was it for you, Martina?
It was honestly the hardest thing I've done professionally in over a decade. And I knew it was going to be hard. I was like, I'm not kidding myself. I'm first timer, but it was, despite knowing that, it was still hard. And I think the journey I took through it was there's getting your thoughts. You think you know what you want to talk about, and then there's actually getting it into a book ready form. And the delta between getting your thoughts out and getting it book ready, I think that amount of work was far more than I anticipated. Because I think it's very popular now. Like, oh, this is a book of 30 blog posts pulled together with a little bit of connective tissue.
Yeah.
And I was actually trying to write a book that stood up as a book because I didn't have 30 blog posts to stitch together. And I wanted it to have a position and point of view. And the review process, actually getting reviewer feedback I got reviews back from people in product, people in marketing, made me realize how reinforced where there was misunderstanding. Like, wow, people are asking for all these things that's marketing, not product marketing. How do I make that more specific? So things that seem obvious to me, when you go through the review process, you realize what isn't clear. So my final revision, I spent a month, and I cut 9,000 words, 8 chapters. I just made it much tighter. Wow. I was like, look, you don't get a reward for making a really long business book. People are trying to get the information as quickly as possible. Wow. So I just tried to tighten it up big time. And that was hard.
I bet. It's like the Mark Twain.
But I think it was better. I think it's loads better as a result.
That's great. Yeah. Well, it's long as it is. So yeah, it's like the Mark Twain quote. If I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. Right? It's hard to write less. Yeah, exactly. That's great. Cool. Well, you touched on this in your talk as well. We have a lot of product managers on the call. There are a couple of questions about this in the chat. So ideally, how should product managers and product marketers work together? What advice do you have for them on how to work best together?
I think the great way to think about it is it's two sides of the same coin. I mean, you're peas in a pod, you're yin and yang, and the best product marketing, product management relationships are one where each of them doesn't feel like they can be successful at their job without the partnership of the other. And it just, because there's only so much each job is huge. And there's only so much you can keep in your head. And you can't keep all of the market notes in your head if you are managing all the details of the product and vice versa. And so you help one another out. If the product manager sharpens and hones the tool set that the product marketer is able to bring to the go-to-market apparatus, and vice versa, where the product marketer is able to help the product team make better decisions that are more market and customer driven. So that's ideally how it works.
Okay, great. And then what advice do you have for teams that don't have a dedicated product marketing person? For those product teams, I saw you advocate, hey, anybody can contribute to good product marketing. That's why I use product marketing, that product marketer. What advice do you have for those teams?
So I very much like now you know what the product marketing work is. And for those that don't have dedicated product marketers, the work has to be done because of that market landscape side that I was showing you. Like if you're not, I just today had a call with a founding CEO, and he's like, I was a practitioner for 28 years. I'm engineering trained, and I decided to start this company because I still felt no one was solving the problem well. And he hired an SEO specialist, a social media person, and a content person, all in 3 different geographies, and a marketing agency. And he's like, and we still have crap. He's like, so how do I fix this? And I said, well, do you have anyone that can do the product marketing? And he's like, probably me. And I'm like, well, then it's you. So the founder, CEO, head engineer, product visionary, he's going to be doing this work because he's the only one that has the capacity to simplify what must be done. Like in 20 minutes, we had a conversation and we were able to distill it. I was like, what you just told me, the way you said it is way better than everything that's on your website. And I just advised him, I said, get in a conversation with your co-founder, record it, because you're going to say it in a way that's way better than if you would write it down. How we communicate things verbally is always different than how we write things. And somehow it goes through some weird marketing translation layer, and it comes out sounding marketing. And nobody wants that right now. They're like, just tell me what it is and tell me what it does and help me understand. Stop marketing at me, which is what anyone who hasn't done marketing thinks marketing is. So if that is you, turn off that thing, that marketing filter, and pretend you're having a conversation with Dan or with me, and you're just trying to explain what you do. And that's the beginning of the product marketing journey.
Good. Sounds good. I know one things in your book you covered was like the well-known positioning template, like blank is a company in the blank market that does blank for this blank audience. And you mentioned that it's kind of simplistic or limiting. So I know positioning, it's funny because there aren't that many great product marketing books. One of them is the old classic, like the positioning one, right? Recent Trial, right? Like, so I'm just wondering, how do you recommend companies create their positioning? What advice do you have for companies?
So positioning, so I draw a distinction between positioning and messaging. So positioning, the position that your market holds in the marketplace through all of the things you collectively do, which includes your messaging. And then messaging, like those examples that I gave in the talk, messaging can begin that positioning journey. So you saw a distinction between messaging that's pure messaging and messaging that actually started to position a product. And that's how ideally you think about messaging. And as it relates to messaging, I'm a huge advocate of toilet flush every formula that you think of. And the best thing to do is to really understand what is it that your audience wants to hear, learn, and understand. And that's what you should message. So today I actually had a conversation with another team. And this is my day job. I'm working with early stage startups. So we're living this reality every day. And I was talking about, and then they were asking me, well, should this be a benefit or should this be a value? And then should we lead with the features? And I said, I don't know. It might be all of those things. It might be none of them. It might be totally different for each audience. We have to figure this out based on what you're hearing when you're going out in the market and what is helping create clarity for your users. And that's the job of messaging. Is this creating clarity? And are people willing to lean in and take that next step? The problem with a lot of the formulas is they kitchen sink everything. And it makes it really difficult to actually understand, what is this? And what does it do? Everything came at me all at once in like super dense, long sentence. And that just doesn't work today. So hopefully that answers the question.
It does. And I like that. I have a similar distinction between positioning and messaging. They're definitely distinct. And that positioning template, it's meant for internal. Like there's a difference between internal documents and external stuff, right? And I think that's a key distinction is positioning documents and frameworks and slides are internal for us to get our stuff in order and figure it out. And then there's like, what do we actually say outside? I think you're advocating for keeping it very simple and conversational when you message it to the outside, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And one of the traps I see, I'm sure you've seen this, is a lot of people fail to do that last step of, okay, now we've gotten this clarity, how do we message it outside? And one of my favorite things I see is when an internal feature name is what it gets called in the wild, like to users, right? It's like the beginning of the project, give it some like acronym or something. And then the team's like, we're not going to actually call it. No, that's just our internal name. But then nobody actually renames it before it goes out the door, right?
Well, it's funny you bring up feature naming and product naming, but that is one of the specific domains of product marketing.
Yep.
in the best companies, where they think through, okay, should we just describe what this feature does, or is it elevated enough that we should actually, or do we need it to be elevated enough that it should be named? So for example, the little red squiggly line, nobody knows this, but we call it Spell It. That was the name of that version. So spell check was spell check, the old menu item. And we're like, oh, we're doing something different now. We're underlining in a dynamic way. We're taking advantage of the idle time between keystrokes, and we're giving you a squiggly line. Hey, you might need to fix this. And that version was called Spell It. And it was important for us to draw that distinction and name it that, so that people didn't just think like, oh, spell check, I already have that.
Right. You don't want people calling red squiggly line. That would not be good.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You don't say like, hey, you'll get a red squiggly line when you describe it, but I like spell it. And part of the act of naming a series of features was, again, if we're trying to hold the position of we're doing all these really smart things, we did a lot of feature naming around the stuff, the enhancements we were doing that were in that 75%, because it showed, oh, look at all this investment that we made. So it, again, a lot of it's just how we're marketing the work that we did.
Right. Awesome. Cool. And then you shared a lot of the templates and canvases from your book. There was one simple framework I saw, which was the CAST, the CAST. So I was wondering if you could just give people a quick overview of that, if that's cool.
Yeah. So Dan had asked me basically like, oh, what about templates? And you don't like the formula, so what would you recommend? And I offer, in exchange for saying, don't use these formulas, just a framework for judging whether or not your messaging is there. And CAST stands for clarity, authenticity, simplicity, and testing. And you just want to make sure, you just kind of want to put it through its paces to make sure that those things are happening. And on the clarity front, that's pretty simple. Is what you do clear. It's surprising, like that great example from RJ Metrics is like, nobody actually knows what this product is doing. It's related to data somehow, but that was about it. So clarity about what you do, authenticity, and this was what Dan was referring to, is that more conversational tone. Can you just say much more simply what you're trying to do? The example of the founding CEO that I had a conversation with earlier today, they basically messaged like, oh, we're this integrated contract management system using machine learning. And I was like, oh, okay, so that's not helpful. But when he just described the problem that he was trying to solve, which is you can't make decisions around the implications of contracts for your business, and we now give you visibility into that, it's conversational, it's more authentic, and it's also more clear. So simplicity, even though I say simplicity, a lot of people conflate that with short. It's really, are you simply communicating the concepts of what you do? So not using jargon, like integrated contract management system using machine learning. That's all technically true, but it actually obscures what it is that I'm trying to understand the very first time I'm engaging with a product. And then the T's for testing, of course, I think it's kind of like, it goes without saying if you're on the product side, but even on the marketing side and the go-to-market side, sometimes it's not as much of a discipline because people are thinking like, oh, I need to figure this out and say it in this perfect way, and only I can massage and hone this being, good at marketing. But really you want to put it in front of people, get their reactions and see if it's achieving its intended end. And you also want to test different variations that are at opposite ends of the spectrum. Because if things are all very close iterations of one another, you won't actually discover whether or not, oh, this is way more, people love this relative to that. And so you need some edges to explore the material that's in the middle and decide where you want to land. So that's what CAST is for, and how to use it as a framework as opposed to a formula.
That's great. And I love the testing piece because, yes, we know product teams, best practice is you test a prototype before you build it. And a lot of times when I've tested prototypes, one of the top first things we get feedback on is the messaging, is the words that we use. Like, even if it's not messaging, it's like what words you used in the interface. Like, oh, you called it this. I don't know what that means. And it's the easiest to change because it's just copy, right? It's really easy to change, but not that many teams actually go out and do it. And I like your point about testing variation, because it is so easy to test a landing page or a tagline or, whatever it is, you can test a lot of variation. It sounds like it reminds me of like a local maxima. If you just test a few little things, you might just find a local maxima and not try other stuff. So
100%. And so I'm glancing at some of the questions as they're going by, but someone asked, is copywriting a must-have skill for a PMM or copy? Being a good writer helps a lot. Not everyone's a great writer. You can have a partner. Like if you work with an editor or someone else that's really good at writing. I think what these days, the luxury we have is things are more conversational. So I would say the more important skill is to be a great listener. And if you listen really well, then you're going to find words that are capturing how to say what you intend. So I would say less so copywriting and much more great listening.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because if you're using strange words, the customers will tell you, do you mean this? They'll tell you the words to use that
exactly.
they know.
Exactly. I'm going through this right now. Our firm is trying to redo messaging for something specific. And I got feedback from all these founders, and I'm literally just pulling words out of there. Like this person's used those words, and that's going straight into the messaging. So I don't have to be a great copywriter. I just need to be good at listening to what moved them. And what can I say that is capturing what they would like to hear? And they're telling me in their own words, which is what they want to see and recognize.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you for answering those questions. We're going to open it up to audience questions now. We have a lot of questions here.
When is the book on Audible? Now.
Excellent.
And apologies to Australia that it's not out yet. So have a friend in America ship it to you, because it is, you'll get it faster, I guess.
Uh-huh. Oh, wow. Okay. Did you record it?
I did.
Awesome.
I did the reading. Went down to LA, had my little LA studio moment.
Nice. Good. Awesome. Okay. So next up, we have Jennifer Sikora. Jennifer.
Thanks for the presentation. I actually had two quick questions for you. One is you did touch on it a bit, but I think a lot of some of the examples you gave, especially from Microsoft, about how product marketing can advocate for specific features and prioritization in roadmap. My experience is that tends to be pretty territorial ground for product management. And so just curious, kind of, you did touch on that a bit, but I've found that there's kind of this sort of hard line between that and how you overcome that. And maybe somewhat related is pricing and packaging is also a hot topic too. And so it's really kind of this theme of how can product marketing have more of a voice in these areas that have been traditionally walled off?
Yeah, such a great question. As it relates to that, and yes, the territorialness of product got to be acknowledged as true. The best way to overcome that is to be someone that's armed with market and customer data and knowledge. Because if you can represent a point of view that is new to them or might not be a perspective that they're aware of, that's the stuff that shines a light and is illuminating. So there's an example that I have in the book about a woman who actually transformed product marketing at Adobe. And she just made it her business to make sure she knew the business of products better than anyone else. And then she could advocate from a market position that was based on data. And product teams they can't deny the data. So if you have an opinion or a point of view, that's one thing. But if you come with a market-based position saying, hey, our lunch is getting eaten by this competitor, and very specifically, either here's the feature that they're hammering us on, or the positioning that they are able to hold that we can't because we can't do this thing. That's really crucial. Company that I'm working with right now, they're hearing over and over that Microsoft Dynamics and HubSpot integration are super important. And it took a long time for the product team to say, yeah, we're going to prioritize that. But they were able to bring the data quarter after quarter. Here's how many more requests that we're getting after that. And here's how many deals we weren't able to close because we didn't have that. So that data helps overcome that silo. So that's the biggest thing that you have on your behalf as a product marketer to really bring something to the product table. As it relates to pricing and packaging, that's become, it's funny, I had all these conversations today, so relevant to tonight. It's become a specialty because it is, so much is dynamic in the cost model of a product these days. And I've seen pricing live just as much with product groups as product marketing groups as a function of finance, depending on the style of company and what the pricing model is. And I think what's important is to separate monetization strategy from pricing, from bundling strategy or packaging strategy. And typically, the product marketing team should own packaging. Like, who is it? What are the use cases are this for? What do we pull together? And that's very rarely in dispute. The pricing of that and then how that might manifest as a product, that might be something that product owns, or they might own the monetization strategy, which are what are all the ways in which we might be able to monetize this. So I think part of it is making sure you have the vocabulary to separate those things, and then just have a productive conversation. There is absolutely no single best way. It's very company dependent, and it's also hyper specialized because there's so many different ways to model pricing.
Yeah,
The book
thank you
I
for
have,
the distinction. I think that's really helpful. Yeah,
I'd say one other, in the book I talk about this, but making sure as a product marketer that pricing is understandable for someone in procurement, and they are comparing your pricing model to other things that they know and understand. So just making sure, like, again, another conversation today, they had the product person who was owning this actually was a person who was specializing in pricing. And she's like, he came in with 18 different layers. And I basically told him, I need a PhD to understand this pricing model. This is so hard. And she just asked a series of questions that forced him to simplify how he was thinking about it and communicating about it. And that act alone massively simplified and improved their pricing model. So not an easy, straightforward answer, but what's true.
All right, great.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Martina. Thanks, Jennifer, for your question. All right, next up, we have Harold.
I guess it hooks into the same question as right now. So you brought up kind of the customer perception and coming from sales and customer success. It feels like ties very heavily into the typical NPS question of, is what's one thing we should improve, which is already hopefully like one of the main systems that feeds into product development versus like all the other things you have to fix, but just understanding what are the pain points of existing customers. How do you feel like that customer perception should be best measured? Just like a driver in the sales team and customer success team kind of bringing their top requests over, or how would you see like also different from how product teams prioritize their work otherwise?
Great question. And I'd say there's no single way other than each organization is going to get a signal that is relevant to them. And sort of the job of the product manager is to take all this stuff in and say, okay, well, based on that, what do we need to pay most attention to? And ideally, you're looking for overlap. As it relates to an NPS, some of the limitation of that is who's responding to it. So you just want to say, okay, that might be representative of 2% of our users. It's hard to get response rates, and it might bias towards a particular thing that's acutely painful. Customer success is going to hear one thing. So I just say keeping in mind that there should always also be a market lens through which that is examined is what matters. Not that, oh, this is the magic formula that's going to help you to prioritize. But I say this at least once a week to the teams that I work with, which is not all of these things are going to be equal in terms of the perception of a customer, in terms of how you meet them, whether or not the product has value. And sometimes, like that word count was a perfect example. No customer, literally zero, was saying, I need word count to be awesome. But the press thought it was really important, and they were super important to us being a successful product. So we did it for them. And sometimes that's the right way to make a decision. So that's the market-centric way of doing it. It was not about a customer. It was like, for us to succeed in the market, we have to do this. A B2B example of that might be, for whatever reason, Gartner's analysts think that this one thing is really important. And you have no proof on the customer landscape, but boy, do they have a hang up about it. You might just do it because you're like, we have to cover off so that they can't say this is a gap that they, time and time again. So that's the market calculus to how you're making those decisions. That kind of answered a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. That's good.
You bet.
Great, Harold. Thanks for your question. Okay, next up we have Theo.
Hey Dan, hey Martina. So I'd like to start off by saying huge thanks to the talk. I think it's I had like a lot of different ideas of what a product marketer does and what product marketing is, but I think this kind of synthesized all of these different concepts, and now it's much clearer. The first question I have is, I personally work in a startup that basically just created the product function after operating for 2 years. So they're now starting to kind of appreciate the whole concept of product. But marketing itself is still very traditional, right? So a lot of what's happening in terms of marketing is still very like, we just need to do some ads and we need to get some leads and we need people to just convert, and that's kind of the lens we have, right? So my first question is, how do you propose that a company kind of starts to have that mindset shift from traditional marketing, and we need basically someone who knows how to run ads and campaigns versus, I mean, how can you start to, as a product evangelist, how can I start to infuse that mindset into the company? That's my first question.
Well, a question I would always ask is, when you look at the traditional marketing work that's being done, do you feel like it is as effective as it can be? And is it properly leveraging all the investment that's being made in product? So, question for you.
No, I don't think so. Because, I mean, the thing is that the company is very much sales driven, right? So we don't have a self-service product. There's a whole onboarding. There's a big ops team. So no, I don't think that we are kind of at that point where we're really leveraging the product itself from a marketing perspective. We're just trying to get people to convert. So yeah, I mean.
Yeah. So in that case, part of how you say, like, we need a function that is quarterbacking how we're thinking through go-to-market much more strategically. And the measures of success of it will be that our win rates should increase. Our sales velocity and cycle time should decrease. These are all indicators that, hey, we're finding our position in the market. And it shouldn't be we're simply turning up the dial on marketing and spending more or throwing more sales reps at it. That is that's this never-ending treadmill that eventually just becomes too costly for a company. And so rather than waiting till you hit that wall, I'd say we need to start making, now that we have a product team, we have an interface that's going to let us sit in between all these functions and quarterback more strategically whether or not we're thinking about how we go to market in a thoughtful way, and put those measures out there saying, don't we want our sales team to be more successful by being able to leverage what's differentiated about our product? We're making the investment anyway. Let's make sure that we leverage it. And without exception, every team that I've seen that has a better, stronger, every sales team that relies on a stronger product marketing foundation, because the messaging is stronger, the position that you're trying to hold in the market, they're always more successful.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I think we can definitely kind of start making more of that shift. I mean, a lot of, I think there's a lot of kind of some of the themes in product marketing that kind of exist in different forms, but it's not a kind of a holistic approach. So that can definitely be improved. My second question is, how would you distinguish between an early stage startup where you have a lot of experimentation, a lot of pivoting from one idea to another? How does product marketing look in a company like that versus a company that has found market product fit and is kind of on that path to growth and kind of further along the S-curve?
Yeah, great question. So at the early stage, it's a generalist that is shucking and driving just as much as the product team, because you're trying to find the market fit part of the product market fit. How do we talk about this in a way that is really resonating? Are we occupying the position that we want? Because you might start with something and it might be good enough right for that moment, but all of a sudden in early stage companies, you've got 5, 10, who knows how other people doing exactly the same thing. Somebody does a quick pivot and all of a sudden they seem like they're on fire. And the way they're talking about it is driving the conversation in the category. And so the product marketer at that early stage has to be very adaptive and very good at metabolizing signal that they're seeing in the marketplace, not just directly with the product, but also just watching what else is happening in the category. So you're a generalist that's really constantly trying to figure that out and tweak it. And when you find what works, to hold or to hold for a period of time and see, okay, what's breaking here before we go to the next thing. So that's what that early stage product marketer looks like, total generalist. At the later stages, they will tend to be much more specifically market oriented. We're targeting the financial vertical. We're targeting the legal vertical. We are targeting medium-sized enterprises that only use 2 of the 5 products that we now have. And so they will organize and market against their segment and be less product oriented. They're leveraging product, but they are much more about leveraging that product to drive its adoption in a market. So they're much more market oriented. Does that answer the question?
Yep, super clear. And then the last question I have is, what is the, basically from a product marketing perspective, you have your ear to the ground, you're listening to what the market feedback is. You're very receptive to like the whole landscape. When you identify an idea, or basically if there's a direction you want to go after, I mean, obviously there's a lot of discovery to be done. So how do you kind of see the handover from product marketing, and here are the insights we have, and then complementing that with more a drill down of data, and then the evaluation on feasibility, viability, value from a product perspective? How do you see that kind of transition?
I don't really look at it as a handoff as much as a partnership, where a lot of the stuff is being discovered together, and then each is basically then metabolizing it toward their domain. So the product team isn't saying, okay, well, based on this, what are we building and how do we do the things that we need to do with this information? Whereas the product marketer is taking that and saying, okay, here are the evangelists that are going to be most important in influencing the outcome. Here is how we need to start owning this space and a series of pieces that we need to put out there, be they blog posts or ebooks or whatever it is, so people know, and so that we've softened the ground that we want to successfully occupy in the future. But there's plenty of product marketing that needs to be done in advance of a product actually being out there. And so that product marketer takes all that learning and they apply it to, here's how we build, so that by the time the product is in market, the market's like, yes, that's exactly what we wanted. How did they know? Because we've been seeding and prepping the market so that they want what we're building.
Super clear. Thank you so much.
You bet.
All right, Theo, thanks for your questions. Our next up, we have Julien. Welcome.
Hello, good evening.
Hello.
So first I wonder who Vader is.
Hey, Vader.
Well, here, I'll show you my little.
Oh, the show. Yay. Oh, there you go.
All right.
1977 original with
nice.
Check out this lightsaber.
Nice. Goes in and out. You can push it in,
respect.
up and down. Nice. That's great. You know, hey, Martina, you don't have the Boba Fett with the rocket, do you?
I do not have the Boba Fett.
No,
That's
the
worth a
special
lot of
one.
money. That's the one worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right,
that was a hard one to get even back then.
Yeah.
So first, thank you for this. Product marketing is new to me. Actually, product is new to me. I've been a developer for 20 years or so before going to product. But it's been great so far, great experience. And my question to you is, I mean, actually, what kind of tips would you have for B2B products where the buyer, so the person making the decision to buy, is not the user? They don't even touch the system. They're just so far away in the organization. They're making a call for people on their organization to use a system that they're not going to touch. So, as a product person, I'm all about the problems we're solving and all those things and the solutions we're providing and etc. But when we're talking to users, great conversation. They get us. They know what we're trying to provide. But when we reach that level of, hey, what's cheaper?
Yeah.
So how do I message those kind of people? I mean,
so a couple thoughts. One is, that's why positioning actually winds up being important, because if the person's mindset is what's cheapest, that means that they're not drawing any value for a distinction between this product doing it this particular way really seems genuinely better. And it's worth a little extra cost because I understand why I might care and not just want what's cheapest. So that's the product marketing, which is hey, make sure people want stuff that is going to be valuable. or that you have invested in and making different. So that's thing one. That's why you want to invest in positioning. Thing two is, as you are thinking about from where you are, there's a lot that you can do that just focuses on shifting mindset around internally around how do we have that market forward way of looking at things. So in the product, you were saying like, oh, it's very clear what I need to do, but bringing that market thoughtfulness to how you are doing what you do, just the act of that by itself is an enormous step forward for someone that comes from your background. That by itself, like I'm just thinking through, if there's only one thing that you did in your seat, if you asked yourself how the customer might perceive this and what are the market implications, and if you just put yourself through that exercise, that will yield tremendous shifts in how you might think about things.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very nice, Julian. Nice question here. So I had some Star Wars minifigures when I was a kid, but I don't know what happened to them. So now what I do is I do Star Wars Legos. So here's a destroyer. Nice. I see that. It's pretty good. It's a custom build. Nice. Yes. And then what else? Got the gunship.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Anyway, cool.
All my Star Wars Legos are upstairs. I only have my action figures here.
Go. Nice. Action figures rock. Okay, JC, you're up next. Let's get you on here, bud. Go for it.
I'm not going to be outplayed in this, so let's see if you can see my wall. Oh man, it's too far.
Nice.
Hold on.
Excellent.
We'll and then.
Oh, nice.
Excellent.
Very, very nice.
It's right there, I swear.
Nice. Believe it.
So
Force is strong with our group.
There you go. So Theo brought up a really good question at the very end of his piece. So a person before, and it was around, really I was thinking about the role of product management as they partner with product marketing. But before you get into that, my question is, how rare is it to really find product marketing being practiced well out there? And then subsequently, because it feels like there's an evolution happening. And on top of that, something you said in the very beginning, it had to do with pragmatic and so forth, but I really feel like there's almost this gravitational pull that we always try to, anchor ourselves with processes and frameworks. And there's nothing wrong with anchoring, but that gravitational pull keeps us there and checking boxes versus, the reality or the reason why we, actually, created that in the first place. And there's that tension. But now I'm seeing evolution, and several times in the conversation, one way or the other, you were kind of saying, well, it depends, and you really have to think about it. You're talking about being intentional and not just following something. So my question is basically, is it rare to find that? And how do we bridge that gap? How do we get there to having more companies practice that, and what role does product management have?
So the answer to your question is, I would say 10-15% of product marketers that I encounter really operate at that master level. I'm trying to think if that's the right percent. Maybe at more senior levels, that percentage increases just because people have had more flight time to see some of the different differences. So there are many VPs of marketing that aren't just in product marketing that actually operate that way. Uh-huh. And so there I'd say maybe it's up to 20% because they understand more the broader spectrum and context that ultimately makes product marketing successful. And in terms of how we collectively help make the world make this transition, I think part of it is re-educating people on, it's really like, what is the purpose of this? It is not, in writing the book, I looked after I submitted my manuscript was the first time I said, well, let me look at other people's frameworks because I didn't want to be affected by them. Without exception, every foundational framework that I saw, they all had strategy. They all had understand your customer, but they all had this huge bucket of, and then the tactics. And that was a bucket unto itself. And the reframe that I think is really important is, of course, that stuff is necessary. It's table stakes. You'll be doing all of those things. However, do not lose sight of the purpose of what you're trying to do. And that is what I see being lost. And I think just reminding organizations or people that you work with and saying, are we shifting? Like the biggest question is, are we occupying the position in the market that we want to? And if we aren't, what are we doing to shift our way and move in that direction? Because it has to be an intentional act. It takes time. There's nothing in product marketing that's a shortcut. Anything that's pure traditional marketing, you can run a campaign, you can do these quick things. And if you're doing all of that, make sure it all adds up to the position that you want to occupy. I do see traditional marketing sometimes being somewhat at odds because people they're performance marketers in particular. This is getting clicks. And we have our metrics that we need to make. And so they want to make those, and how they get there isn't quite as important, but it becomes then a strategic business decision for the executives to say, hey, is that ultimately, is what we're doing to fill our pipeline now at the expense of our future success, because we'll no longer be relevant in the space that we need to occupy. So it takes some discipline to make sure that the conversation is happening, but hopefully now people have greater vocabulary for knowing what to ask for. Because I think that's a big piece that's been missing, is people haven't known what to ask for. They know they need it or they think they need it, but they don't know what to ask.
Yeah, can I follow up real quick? Just it seems like there's also this fear though that we gravitate toward. And marketing has been one of the groups that this weight has been put on them to get us out of the hole, and that happens a lot. I still see it happening a lot. Yet that may be a short-lived or a short-term fix, and we know that. How do we bridge that to get out of that and think long-term? And basically, what you were saying, and thinking about this more intentionally and so forth. I mean, have you seen that a lot?
Yeah, and I would say it's not an either or. It needs to be both. I mean, if you have a hole that you're trying to dig yourself out of, you have to do the work. You can't say like, oh, you know what, our revenue doesn't matter, we don't need it. Like you have to do that work. But I don't think these things are mutually exclusive. I think when product marketing is done well, it should improve every single one of those things. Now, the inverse of that can be true as well, which is people get like, oh, we need perfection in product marketing. We need to have everything perfect before any of the marketing can be done. And that's not true these days either. It's like these things will shape and inform one another. And you have to move at the speed that your market and business requires and not be overly precious about it. And just say, hey, we're going to learn, we got to run and gun. And I'd say agile marketing practices are one of the ways I see people overcome that in their organizations, which is each week, what do we learn? And the product marketer is the inverse of what's happening, or not the inverse, but it's a parallel to what is happening on the product side. The product marketer runs the stand-up, all the people on the go-to-market side are there, and each week they discuss, what did we learn? What is important? Are we going to reprioritize some of what we do? And then some people run that with campaigns, other people run it in assets that they're creating. It gives everyone a weekly venue in which they can have things that might not have been urgent suddenly get reprioritized, and now in 2 weeks, I'm going to have what I need. So agile marketing practices are a way that I've seen people help incorporate both sides of that so that they rapidly evolve together.
Awesome. Thank you. Congratulations on the book. And I was going to buy it, but I got a great email from Dan this morning in my day that I'm getting the book. So I'm excited.
Well, I'm excited. I'm genuinely excited to hear what you guys think and if it's helpful. And I'm realizing too that I might not have fully answered the question around on the B2B side, when the buyer is totally different than the user, what are some of the things that you need to think about? And I would say broadly, the modern buying journey has really shifted what that means. And the influencers in any buying process are very different than what they used to be. That whole 75% is self-serve. There's an organization I worked with that went in to sell to Uber. And they had a particular product. They said, hey, we think our product really is going to have value to you. This was the enterprise sales rep. And they were told, we've actually already evaluated you guys and decided you're not a fit. And they went back and said, well, you weren't even in our CRM. How could you have evaluated us? No one's had a conversation with you. They had over 30 different individual people that went and got information about the product in all these different spaces, none of them registering above the marketing operations defined threshold of a lead, but all of them gathering information. And that collective act made them make a decision that was completely invisible for all the quote unquote marketing thresholds that had been defined. So I think in the modern B2B era, you have to cast a net, that whole evangelistic part, where all the people that might be influencing the decision can find the pieces that they might be looking for that might not be obvious. It might not be part of an obvious sales cycle, but you have to cover off on that influence net if you're on the B2B side, because so much is done self-serve today.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for your question, JC. Appreciate it. All right. And I just, I want to jump in and chime in. I'm so glad that you brought up this agile approach to product marketing, because I've seen it be very successful too. And it occurs to me that there are some longer activities in marketing, but you don't have like, oh, I have to code that for 2 weeks. Like that you don't tend to get the big spike activity. So I feel like it's really amenable to that 1 week or 2 week cadence, even more so than coding, I would think, right?
Yeah, well, there are things like major launches that do take months sometimes to prepare you, because there are all these different things that need to. So you have the long pull things and the short pull things, and certainly for production of assets, like a lot of what we're talking about, like, hey, how do you create this net? What are the campaigns? That stuff is all shorter cycle stuff, and yeah, really is very easy to do in that agile framework.
Yeah, cool. Okay, last question here is Nate. Let's get you in here, Nate.
Hey, Martina. So my question is, which non-product marketing roles, so for example, PR, growth, performance, lifecycle, have you seen any of those roles have the most transferable skills to product marketing? So I'm just curious, have you seen any trends with people in marketing who are looking to transition to product marketing? You're seeing way more of this role than others.
Yes, I think the growth marketers are the ones that have the most transferable skill set. And it's because they are already thinking about what are all the different levers that I have at my disposal. And the product marketer's job is like, what are all the go-to-market levers at my disposal? And they're just different ones than the growth marketer. But they already have that mindset. And what a growth marketer would need to add to the skill set is that next level of like, how do we occupy a market position, as opposed to just the pure tactical? Am I moving the ball forward on the key metrics that are that I'm trying to move as it relates to product growth? So it's just kind of that next level above. I'd say the second place in that, I don't know if I've seen this enough to generalize around it, but some organizations have people that do analyst relations in the communications group, and they have to develop a skill set in dealing with these analysts, if they do it really well, that where they're not just a facilitator of conversations, where they are the ones actually trying to drive and own the relationship. It's very much an exception, an exceptional person I've seen that's capable of doing that, but I've seen at least 2 people in the last 10 years that had that skill set and were doing analyst relations and communications.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
You bet.
Great. Awesome, Nate. Thanks for your question. And yeah, thanks everyone.
Yeah. Oh, and I forgot to mention, like I teach a public workshop on product marketing. The next one is in May. And if you go to svpg.com, you can learn more about it.
Awesome. Yeah. If you want to put the link in the chat, feel free to do that. That's great. And yeah. How long have you been teaching that?
I've been teaching that for a decade.
Okay.
But I've recently updated it to include all of the book stuff, obviously.
Got it.
In a good way. I think it's gotten better.
Right. Great. Awesome. Cool. Martina, thank you so much for a great talk and taking the time to share your product marketing advice with us. Really appreciate it.